it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to Kirsty, Douglas, Catherine, everyone who was played a part in inviting me to be part of this. It's a pleasure to meet you all. My intention for today is just hopefully to start by telling you something about my story, and particularly how we came to set up this organization called the AFBE. And I'm hoping that through that, you draw some inspiration of your own. I know that not everyone here is an engineer, even though I'd like you all to be. But I hope that in my journey, you see something of your own and that we can share. So I'm a process engineer, a chemical engineer is what we're also called. I lead a team of process and safety engineers at what I've been calling Aberdeen's best consultancy, but I would say that, wouldn't I? And we do everything from looking at some of the problems that we face on everything from offshore plants, onshore plants, to looking at some of the new technologies, things around carbon capture. Worked on a project some time ago, taking plastics and converting them to hydrogen. So many interesting projects that are happening. And I've done that for about 25 years. I come from a family of engineers. My father used to say that in the big polygamous African family that he was raised in, he said he was engineer number 23. I never met the other 22, but I'm sure he was telling me the truth. But you would think it was those uncles and aunties that inspired me to want to be an engineer. But no, you'd be wrong. Because the real reason for my deciding to become an engineer came from a much darker source. When I was 9, I read a book, and in that book there was an evil genius who could use solar energy and chemicals for world domination. Like any good Christian 9-year-old boy, I thought, that's who I want to be like when I grow up. My values are different now, so you'll be pleased to know. I went on to do a degree in Sheffield, chemical engineering and process engineering, and then went on to do a PhD in combustion, as if that helps matters. I remember once being in an airport and admitting that that's not a good idea. But all of that eventually led me to the process of looking for work. So it was a year that was quite difficult for engineers generally to find work. And I remember applying for jobs and getting rejection after rejection. And at a point, I remember thinking, there must be somebody having a joke at my expense, because I used to go to this library to apply for jobs. And on this particular day, I went to the library, applied for jobs, did a bit of a walkabout, and then went home. And before I got home, I'd already had a message saying, after careful consideration, we won't be moving you further. I thought that was 3 hours ago. How careful could you possibly have been in your considerations? But that whole process eventually led me to, I eventually found a job. In fact, I got 2 job offers. And then started working. And, in those days, I worked on projects that pretty much in every continent, all from my office in Crawley. But I got involved in so many different projects. And it's been a fascinating journey. And I'd recommend engineering and technology to everyone. And, if I get a chance later on today, I would like to actually share why I think innovation and diversity really come together. But some of the challenges that I also had started on day 1. I remember arriving at work, my then boss wanted to know a bit about my family. And I remember saying to him that my father, who was a mechanical engineering professional, who was an academic, and then went back into academia. When I said he went back into academia, my boss then said, this has just been in a few hours of us meeting, he said, well, failed engineers teach. So I remember thinking, that's a bit unusual, but I didn't think too much of it. But by the second day, I was being told that your PhD is not worth the paper that it's written on. This was not a response to performance, it was day 2. I barely had a chance to do anything. But that started the tone for the next 2.5 years, where there would be constant sort of bullying and humiliation quite regularly in the workplace. So much so that other people would come over to me and ask, why are you being treated like that? I remember those days, for example, I'd have, it was quite normal if, you had something happen in your family displayed on your wall screen. And I remember displaying a picture of my nephew who was born. And my boss would often come over to my desk, look at the picture, and I'd go, that's an ugly baby. That's an ugly baby. And despite all of that, I refused, even when it was suggested to me, to think of it as a race-related thing. So two reasons for that. We all go into life with a certain degree of imposter syndrome, and there's a tendency that when people say you're not good enough, part of you thinks they're probably right. I'd also heard of people who constantly go to race as a way of explaining away poor performance. I thought I never want to be like one of those people. And so for a long time I didn't. But over a while, I started to come across other people similar background to me, who were also having these experiences. One of those was my sister. Started her job 4 years after I did, completed a PhD before going into work, and was faced with a constant combination of racist and sexist innuendo on a daily basis. We were also living in Croydon at the time, and there was a lot in the news to do with knife crime, youth violence. And so I remember at the time, just going back to work for a moment, I remember thinking, I'm still not accepting the racism assessment. I'm going to look in my organization and see if there's anyone I can find who has got these similar background to me, who can maybe help me see the wood for the trees. I looked around. There wasn't really anyone with that background. We were living in Croydon, as I said, and we could see that there was a need for young black role models, or black role models. At the time, it was quite normal that an R&B singer would be presented as the best example of excellence from within our community. And I remember thinking, well, we're not Jay-Z, but we work as engineers, so that's not too bad. And so we had a desire to find the people we couldn't find in our organizations, because they had to be somewhere, and also to reach the community. And it was those two things that led my sister and I in 2007 to found the AFBE. Started off with sent out an email to loads of people, got responses from everywhere. I was in London at the time, so got responses from everywhere, including Aberdeen, which, as far as I was concerned, is like the end of the earth. And so we got messages from everyone, and we started our first meeting in my little Croydon flat, and we had 5 people. One of those people was my wife, so she's really there just to support me. But we started to talk about what we could do in the community, and we came up with an idea, the Making Engineering Hot program, which we thought about calling Making Engineering Sexy, but we thought maybe not. It might attract the wrong audience. So we called it Making Engineering Hot, and we would go into inner city schools to talk to young people about our jobs. I moved up to Scotland in 2010 and noticed that a place like Aberdeen was also quite an international community, and that led us to start another set of programs. Today, our programs have impacted more than 20,000 people. We have about 2,500 members across the UK, and the main objective of our work, and the main objectives I believe that any diversity initiative should focus on, are these 3 areas. There is the attraction piece, which is connecting what we do on a regular basis within our industries to community. There is the retention piece, because statistically, in my industry, for example, 1/3 of all British engineering undergrads are from a black and minority ethnic background. This is not considering internationals at all. We're talking about people who were born and brought up here. But the industry has 9%. So there is a leaky pipeline. So what we're going to do to plug that leak is run programs, run initiatives that meet people at that stage. And then there is also the leadership challenge, so that when people get into the industry, the likelihood that they ever get into leadership positions is often very low. It leads to the suggestion that most organizations look a bit like a pint of Guinness. White at the top, dark at the bottom. Our aim is to convert it into a latte. And so attraction, retention, and progression. So I guess the challenge I will leave with you before we hear many of the amazing speakers that you're going to listen to today is, first of all, what do you consider to be your blind spot? Because we all have them. We all have an area that is kind of out of our view, off our radar. So what do you consider to be your blind spot? Second question I ask you is, how do you define for yourself on-and privilege? It can be quite a difficult topic, but in the hands of an ally can be a very powerful tool. So let's have a think about that. What are we doing to attract more people? People from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, our female colleagues, people from, do our companies reflect the communities in which we operate? What can we do to ensure that there is retention so that the people that come into our organizations don't come in and then leave? And what are we doing to ensure that at every level, including leadership levels, it looks like the communities in which we function? Because I believe that on the back of that are some of the greatest innovation, resilience. It's a business advantage. So that's what I'm going to leave you all with today. Thank you.